am thrilled, like I said, to have a chance to talk to you this morning about the topic of color and culture and Denver's cultural plan, Imagine 2020. And there's some familiar faces in the room, so thank you for being here, and I'm pleased to have a chance to indoctrinate some new faces around the cultural plan. I will say that this was a pretty heady topic to try to get my head around on how to talk about the cultural plan through the lens of color, and we'll see how I did, and you guys can be the judge. But before I get started about the cultural plan, I just want to give you a real brief overview of Arts and Venues, the city agency that developed the cultural plan on behalf of the community. We are a relatively new agency in the sense that we were a result of a merger between the Division of Theaters, Arenas and the Denver Office of Cultural Affairs. And so you can see on this slide our mission and the different venues that we operate, including Red Rocks Amphitheater and the Colorado Convention Center, but also the Performing Arts Complex and this delightful building. It's our oldest addition to our portfolio, the McNichols Building. And these are the kind of programs that we're delighted to offer here, and so I'm thrilled that you're part of it today. We also have a great public art program, and we've got some of our public art folks in the back row. Woot. And so who surprise and delight us on a daily basis with all of the great artwork we have around our city. So when I was thinking about this topic of color and culture, I'm not going to give credit, I'm not going to take sole credit for this description of the presentation because, frankly, there were really some smart people who helped me think this through. But it was pretty heady stuff. You know, how do you sort of try to think through and talk about both rather abstract kinds of topics? The abstraction that is color and the abstraction that is culture, and sort of unpackaging those was I thought a really rather interesting sort of challenge. And so, like I said, you can let me know how I did, but when I was making this presentation, I sort of started asking myself, well, what is culture? What is color? How is color made? What would the world be without color? What would the world be without culture? What would the world be without light, which is what creates color? And what are those sort of parallels that we can draw from culture, and how does all of this perhaps relate to our new cultural plan, Imagine 2020? And what has one got to do with the other? And how can I tell a story around the cultural plan and color that makes any kind of sense? So we'll see how this goes, but I'm hopeful. You know, so I first started thinking about, well, you know, what would the world be without color? And, you know, I think it would be rather sad, right? At least that's the initial thought, is it would be kind of sad. And, you know, those are kind of bleak landscapes. And would it be sort of like a bit of a wasteland? And what would, and would that be what society would be like if we didn't have culture? And that's a very, I think, also a very heady question. But then I saw this photo and I was like, well, wait a minute, that looks kind of cool. And so, you know, talking about culture or talking about color, we really can't talk about it in sort of the lack of. Talking about the lack of color or culture is not really an affirmative way to talk about culture whatsoever. So that didn't feel like a very, you know, sort of strong path to try to approach this conversation. It's not really that inspiring or that thought-provoking, quite frankly. And I realized, well, this audience is a lot smarter than that, so I've got to kind of take a different tact. So then let's think about the question of, well, then what is culture? And, you know, you start where we always start, which is, you know, what is the definition of culture? And, you know, the definition is, you know, arts and the other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. It's the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. It's also the cultivation of bacteria, tissue cells, etc., which I think we're all going to agree we're going to talk about the first definition today, correct? Okay, good. So let's agree that we'll start there on that part. So I actually, again, like most people I would think, did a little bit of a Google search on, what is the world without culture, and really, can you have a society without culture? And on debate.org, at least, 14% said yes, you can have a society without culture. 86% said no. And it was actually a rather interesting online debate, and I encourage you guys to go check it out if you're interested. But it does, create the question of sort of which comes first, society or culture and society. But now we're really getting, I think, very heady. So when we talked about the cultural plan, we knew we had to talk about the what of culture, right? And so the what of culture is places, its programs, and its attributes. And so we knew we had to, you can't create a cultural planning process and not sort of talk about those three critical elements. And so, I've had the opportunity to live in Denver since 1997, but I'm from Atlanta originally, and I lived in Chicago and Cincinnati. And so, it's always interesting to sort of think about, well, what are the culture of those places, and how do those different places, how are they, what are the similarities and what are the differences? So, when people think of Atlanta, they often think of, very sort of historic Southern kinds of places and perhaps kinds of mentalities. They often think of Peachtree Street and Peachtree everything. But certainly there's those institutions that are important that help to make up the culture of a place. This is a picture of the High Museum of Art in Atlanta, where I had my first sort of real big girl cultural job. And the Fox Theater, the historic Fox Theater in Atlanta. But we also have things like the Varsity, which is the world's largest drive-in. And if you've ever gone to Atlanta, hopefully you've experienced the world's largest drive-in, and also the world of Coke, because we don't have Pepsi in the South, and it's part of our culture. It was, well, you couldn't find Pepsi products in Atlanta, but my dad worked for Emory University, which is largely funded by the Woodruff family, which started Coca-Cola. And so, Coca-Cola was sort of the bedrock of our family in a lot of ways. But I also lived in Chicago, and I think there are probably several people who've had a chance to live in Chicago. And so, what's the culture of Chicago, and what's part of that place, and what are those programs and those attributes that make for that authentic place? And so, this is a delightful poster that I think calls out a lot of those places that make Chicago so unique. Like Wrigley Field, like Chinatown, like Navy Pier, and of course the Millennium Park and the Bean. It's its skyline. It's its proximity to the lake. It's amazing, the Art Institute of Chicago. It's the Chicago Theater and that iconic sign. It's also the architecture of Chicago, which Chicago has a significant amount of pride about its historic architecture and its urban planning. Daniel Burnham, make no little plan. So that's part of the spirit of Chicago, is really always thinking big and bigger and bigger and bigger. And like you have the Bean. And even bigger. Big food, sometimes big people. And, you can't have Chicago without the Chicago Bears and sports, and that's true for Denver as well. But it's also those attributes of those places. I mean, one thing about Chicago that unites Chicagoans is how dreadful the weather is, and so, what are those things that sort of call together and bring about the culture of a place? And so those are all those kinds of things that we too needed to think about as part of the cultural planning process. Is what are those things that make Denver special? What are those places? What are those programs? What are those attributes that unite us as a community that make us feel like this is a place? But there's also the how of culture, right? There's also, it's about how we do things as a community. Are we cooperative? Are we collaborative? Do we have a real grassroots sort of bottom-up approach, or do we have a more of a top-down approach kind of city? Is it an attitude of yes, or do we find ways to say no? Are we open, or are we entrenched? When we do things, is it organic? Is it planned? Is it contrived? And so those are all the things that also we've thought about in the course of this planning process. At the very beginning, how do we really make sure that in the course of creating a cultural plan for Denver, we're being thoughtful about the what, but we're also being thoughtful about the how, and making sure those two things come together so that we're creating a process that is reflective of our community in the same way. So I'm just going to ask you guys for a little group participation, but what would you say Denver's culture is? What are some attributes that come to mind? Or places, or programs, or how we do things? This is the group participation part. Outdoors. Right on. Informal. Very. Cowboy.
Owning a dog.
Owning a dog.
Owning a Subaru.
Owning a Subaru. Wow. Beer.
Green chili.
Whoa, now you guys are getting to... Wait, I heard one over here. Rick, you said something?
Green chili.
Green chili. Sports. Collaboration. Transplants, yeah. We have a lot of those, me included. So those were the kind of attributes and thoughts that we had when we started the cultural planning process, and we had our Denver Commission on Cultural Affairs. Rick Griffith is one of our commissioners. You know, we really had to ask ourselves a question: well, how do we make sure our process is very much part of Denver's sort of DNA, and we needed to reflect that DNA. So, but then I asked myself the question in the course of making this presentation: well, what is color? And how do we, well, what is it? And so color is the aspect of things that is caused by differing qualities of light being reflected or emitted by them. And again, I mean, I hadn't really thought about what is color in quite some time. And it was, you know, I actually did a little bit of digging just because it was really rather interesting and illuminating to be thinking, you know, through some of these things, again, through the lens of culture and our cultural plan. So then I started thinking about color theory, because, right, certain colors create moods and or are given those kinds of attributes. And it was several people, Goethe in particular, who really thought about the psychology of color. And so then I started thinking, well, can I sort of think about how the cultural plan is a spectrum of colors and try to, you know, come up with a way to talk about it in that way, because I thought that might be an interesting way to sort of frame this conversation. And I was like, holy crap, this is awesome. Because, you know, Roy G. Biv, you know, there are 7 colors in, you know, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. This is awesome. 7 colors. We have 7 vision elements in our cultural plan. Perfect. I can figure out a way to make this all talk about this, and, you know, I nailed it. And I kind of did. So I was pretty psyched about that. So we have 7 vision elements in the course of our cultural plan. This is the framework by which our cultural plan came to be. And this is through feedback we learned and we heard from the community, which I'll talk about later in the presentation. But just broadly speaking, the 7, you know, sort of big pillars are integration, amplification, accessibility, lifelong learning, that artists thrive in our community, and we use the word artist very broadly for you designers and others in the room, economic vitality, and collective leadership. And so I started looking at, okay, well, how, you know, do these line up? And damn it, they sort of did. It was awesome. So, you know, integration is about passion, desire, and love. And we talked about sort of people wanting to be surprised and delighted and kind of fall in love with their city. just by turning the corner and seeing something beautiful, because art is integrated. We talked about amplification, and here we have that orange represents enthusiasm and attraction and stimulation. Perfect. Yellow is associated with joy, happiness, intellect, and energy. Okay, not quite aligned with accessibility, but maybe I could make that work. Lifelong learning is about growth, and as is the color green, so that was a home run. The artists thrive, and blue is associated with stability, and I guess stability is maybe another word for sustainability. Economic vitality was, they don't really have one for indigo, which is disappointing. And then collective leadership is around sort of this idea of ambition and wisdom. So again, I thought, oh great, I can really talk about these 7 vision elements of our cultural plan and associate them with color, and that would be, I'm done. But then I did some more digging, and I asked the question, well, what causes color? And so to see color, you have to have light. And our eye only sees the colors that are bounced off or reflected. And I thought that was really interesting when we think about color and culture, because culture is that thing that that sort of bounces off of us or is reflected by us by virtue of us interacting with the world. And so color is the result of light being either made or lost or moved. And that really struck me too, because culture is a result of us making something. Sometimes it's the result of something being lost and us thinking about it and remembering it and having that, heritage piece, as a for instance. It's also because we moved something. And again, that's a little bit around, as a for instance, to real literally, that America is a country of immigrants, and it's a great example of how our culture has evolved because it's never static. And so when you think about, so maybe culture is light, maybe it's not color. I don't know. It was an interesting, it got me really thinking. But when we got into Denver's cultural plan, though, and again, I'm backing into this. It wasn't like we sat down and said, I know, we should, look at this from the perspective of color and then develop our cultural plan based on all of these things. That would have been really smart. But Denver's cultural plan, like we said, we knew it had to reflect our community. We knew it had to sort of emit a certain kind of, new energy, perhaps, a new direction, a new light, hopefully that would create emotion, just like color creates emotion or reflects emotion, perhaps. It had to be about the what, and it had to be informed by the how. So now I'm going to move into kind of the less heady part of the presentation, perhaps. That's my word for the day, I guess, is heady. So what is cultural planning, for those of you who may not be familiar? It's a process which identifies the arts and cultural needs and preferences of a community. It examines existing resources and opportunities, and it strives and proposes strategies to meet its residents' needs. And so when we endeavored into creating this cultural plan for Denver, a couple of things. We hadn't had a cultural plan in over 25 years. Not the end of the world. Chicago hadn't had one in over 25 years. If we want to continue to compare ourselves to Chicago, which I don't mean to be doing, but I guess I am today. And so we knew that we needed to have a planning effort that was going to reflect the culture of our community. So inclusive, collaborative, like somebody mentioned, that it needed to be fresh, it needed to be visionary. We're pragmatic people, folks. We needed it to make sure that it was going to also hold us accountable and actually get something done, which is why we chose a 7-year time horizon for our planning process, our actual planning document. We wanted it to be creative. I mean, if it's, if at the very least, a cultural plan would hopefully be creative. And we wanted it to reflect sort of our entrepreneurial spirit. And so again, from that kind of a light analogy, that we wanted to have those kind of attributes. You know, great cities have cultural plans, and Denver is truly a great city, and this was affirmed time and again when we heard from the community during this process. Imagine 2020 doesn't try to fix anything, because frankly, nothing was broken. And we heard that through the course of the planning process. We've got a good thing going on here. The question was, how do you take it up a notch? How do you amplify it? How do you generate more buzz? And how do we make sure that the entire community can participate in arts, culture, and creativity? And so our cultural plan intends to provide an opportunity to fuel our economic engine through creative enterprises and philanthropy, encourage artistic exploration, illustrate and celebrate the diversity in our community, infuse creative thinking into our city's DNA. I think it's already in there. It's just how can we, again, take it up a notch. Imagine 2020 is really designed to build on the great foundation. And so when we were doing this planning effort, you know, we did get asked the question, well, why do you need a cultural plan now when all these great things are going on and we haven't had one in 25 years? And my response to that would be, well, yeah, we've got a lot of great things going on, but just because we've had in the past doesn't mean we shouldn't be looking forward and thinking strategically about how we can really work together collectively as a community to make sure that arts, culture, and creativity are part of our ongoing fabric. So we were really intentional about how we reached out to the community. And again, going back to that analogy of color, we were, just like an artist is very intentional about the colors they select when they paint a painting, we were very intentional about how we reached out to our community. And we were fortunate to work with a consulting firm who helped us with that effort. We did everything from a scientifically valid phone survey, oversampling for African American and Latino households, to having a booth at SCFD Free Days at the Art Museum and the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, for instance. So when kids were getting their face painted, we had parents filling out our surveys. And so we really tried to think about where can we engage and meet people where they are, but how do we reach those folks, that general public, that circle, the red circle? How do we reach those that are not perhaps already engaged with arts, culture, and creativity? So all told, we heard from over 5,000 people in the course of our planning process. And like I said before, we weren't trying to fix something that was broken, because one of the things that we first learned is that people have a pretty good impression about arts, culture, and creativity in Denver. So we asked the question, when you think of arts, culture, and creativity, what are the first 3 adjectives that come to mind? So the bigger the word, the more that word was used in answering that question. So diverse, obviously, was one that people, right away referred to. And then we didn't give them a list of questions or a list of words. These are words that they chose. Exciting, growing, vibrant, fun, accessible, unique, varied, creative, innovative, interesting, all great stuff, right? Expensive. That was the one that, on the list that is also the same size as accessible. So that was a question that we had to answer or we tried to answer was, is it just because people aren't aware of all the great free programming that's available? Or is it a challenge of childcare? So it's not just the ticket to the museum, it's all the other things that have to go with it. Or is it truly just that, first point of entry, barrier to entry? So I'm going to show you a little video because it's more fun than me sort of walking you through the minutia of the plan.
What you see sometimes defies explanation. Sometimes it's real. Sometimes it's your imagination. Imagination is unavoidable.
Art should be unavoidable. It should be accessible to people, and it should be sort of unexpected. The more you do that, the more unavoidable it is, the higher the profile of the city, and then people just sort of expect it.
The last time Denver created a cultural plan was 1989. Mayor Pena had said, "Imagine a great city." Denver's new cultural plan, Imagine 2020, reflects the spirit of the past with a vision for the future. Imagine 2020 is designed to give Denver a renewed sense of direction and promotion of the arts, culture, and creativity. embracing opportunity and diversity. It's built on 7 visions.
We really built the plan around 7 vision elements that the community articulated during the course of the planning process. And it's everything from the importance of arts education to people really feeling like arts is integrated into their daily life, and that the arts, culture, and creativity really contribute to the economic vitality of our community.
Imagine 2020 asked the residents to imagine what the future of the arts and creativity in this great city should look like, and 5,000 had their voices heard. These visions form the artistic, cultural, and creative future for the city.
A cultural plan is intended to provide a strategic direction on how we collectively work together to achieve some goals.
We wanted to create a structure that would be good for the city, for the people who work in the city to help implement, and for the people who live in the city to help implement. You need private people, you need the individual creative people, you need foundations, you need corporations who will put their shoulder to this thing. And we've gotten that kind of endorsement from everyone.
Imagination spawns creativity, and creativity leads to innovation and enterprise, making good cities into great cities, as witnessed through their art, architecture, venues, and events. Mayor Hancock remarked that arts and culture are the heart of this great city. Imagine 2020 will inspire us to take Denver's creative economy to the next level.
We know that Denver's creative sector is an important part of our economy. We want those businesses and those individuals to thrive and stay here. We think that they contribute a certain kind of vibrancy in our city that's important.
Envision Denver as a world-class city, a global city, where the creative sector can flourish. An overwhelming majority believe that arts, culture, and creativity contribute to the vitality of the city. Imagine 2020, Denver's cultural plan, is a crucial part of the foundation needed to attract global talent, businesses, and visitors who are eager to experience the vibrant and great city of Denver.
So hopefully that brought to life the cultural plan in a way that a PowerPoint slide can't. So I will just say and add a little bit to that. Imagine 2020 is a cultural plan that was stewarded by arts and venues, but it's a plan for the entire city to embrace and help implement. And there's a variety of goals and strategies and objectives that are outlined in the cultural plan under those 7 vision elements, and we certainly encourage everyone, including those of you in the room, to look at that plan and see how you can help us move the needle and implement the cultural plan. We have a variety of tools on our website that allow for that, but I will not get into that right now. But we have had a lot of progress today, and I'm really pleased to be able to say that because we launched the cultural plan just March of this year. So we get in our office say that we birthed a baby in March of 2014, but it's going to take a whole community to raise it. And it's only, 5 months, 6 months old. And here are some of the things that we've done in its very short time. We introduced the PS You Are Here grant program. We also sponsored the Oh Heck Yeah project that just culminated at the end of July. With the help of Visit Denver, Denver365.com, the city's resource on finding out about what happens around the city in arts, culture, and creativity just got a refresh. That, I will say, was the number one thing that people said, what are barriers to your participation in arts, culture, Creativity? Number 1 was, I don't know what's going on. Number 2 was money. So this was a really important one for us. Accessibility, we sponsor the Cross-Culture Pilot Program and are working with our partners in the city to expand the My Denver Card program to include cultural organizations. We also are working with DPS on their arts education strategic plan. We had Art Space, which is a nonprofit developer of affordable artist live-work space, come, and they're in the middle of a feasibility study for the River North Arts District. And we have been working with the Denver Commission on Cultural Affairs to expand their role in helping to implement the cultural plan. And we've been working with Bonfi Stanton Foundation and others on our collective conversations and this question around collective leadership and how do we all sort of lean in as a community to really drive the cultural plan forward. So with that, I want to thank you guys for your time and the opportunity to talk to you about color and culture and light and what makes Denver special for me. And oops, I'm sorry, I just touched the mic. What makes Denver special to me and hopefully to all of you in this room. And the Denver Cultural Plan is really a call to action. It's hopefully not a plan that sits on a shelf. And so I encourage you all to help in that. You're a bunch of bright people, and you've got good things going for what it is that you do on a day-to-day basis, and I hope that we have a way to partner and we can reflect that over the next 7 years so that Denver is an even better, stronger place in 2020. Sure. So the question was, which site should you go to find out what's going on in Denver? Should it be the Denver365.com website or the Imagine 2020 website? It should be the Denver365.com website. That's the site that is managed by Visit Denver and where you as an organization can go and plug in all of the things and activities that are happening. And that's the site that they push out to residents as well as visitors. The Imagine 2020 site is where you can go to download the cultural plan. You can also download the study that we did that helped to inform the cultural plan if you're interested in the phone survey and crosstabs and all that kind of exciting stuff. And that is also where you can register the events that you are doing that align with Imagine 2020 and one of the 7 vision elements, because we do use that as a way to promote to the community those things that you are doing on a quarterly basis. And in fact, this quarter's newsletter should be going out later, hopefully today. And so, yes, so hopefully that answers your question. So the question was, statement question was, a lot of artists are starting to get priced out of Denver, and how can we help them find resources so that they can either stay or what are those places that they can go to sort of, have some sustainability and stability. So this is not a new question or challenge that we've been thinking about, but it's an important one, and it's certainly one that is, we had obviously the economic downturn, and that sort of stalled things for a while, and everyone sort of, I think, breathed a sigh of relief because the market was pretty hot up to that point, and we're back where we were, pre-2008 as far as real estate goes, particularly in certain communities like River North Arts District and others. So that part of what we're trying to do with the Art Space program is to see if there's a way to create a development project that creates a toehold for the artists in that community that don't own their own property. We have a program here at Arts and Venues called Create Denver. It's a program that looks at how do we grow the creative economy, and it's hard to grow it if people can't afford to stay here. So that's one of the things that that they support. Lisa Gigautis, who is not here today, but she works on some of those issues and can be one of those connectors for folks.